Hi guys, Meredith here. I am here today to stir some pudding, essentially, and also get this assignment done. So for this screencast, as you might be able to see in the top, on my tabs open, I am going to be doing a tutorial on how to use Sparknotes to your advantage. So as a studying English teacher, I noted in high school that a lot of English teachers, they say, "Don't you dare use Sparknotes in my class." I've found that that's not entirely true, to not use Sparknotes at all. Sparknotes is incredibly useful as a supplementary material, and I do stress that, supplementary material. If you don't actually read the book, then you aren't going to do as well. I promise. I know from experience. My project on The Picture of Dorian Gray was not as great as my project on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and there's a reason for that. It's because I actually read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So, one of the best things that Sparknotes has to offer you is No Fear Shakespeare. Shakespeare is tricky, especially if you haven't read it before or you haven't read it in a while. In this day and age, we don't speak like this at all anymore, not even close. So it's something that needs constant practice and upkeep to really get good at it, at least, at a young age. So, one of the things that No Fear Shakespeare does that is really fantastic is it offers you both Ye Olde English, the original text, and the modern text, side by side. So you can read it in the original text, and then it will have a translation of it right next to that. The important thing to note when you're reading No Fear Shakespeare, though, is that you do actually have to read the original text. A lot of Shakespeare is play on words. It's puns, it's euphemisms, all that fun stuff, all that cleverness that will get lost in the No Fear Shakespeare. Let's see. Okay, so here's an example of the flaw with No Fear Shakespeare. I found it. So here in the original text, Don Pedro says, "Well, as time shall try, and time the savage bull doth bear the yoke." While in the modern text it says, "Well, time will tell, even the most savage bull is eventually domesticated." So what you're missing here is the idea of the yoke, which is used to hitch a bull up to, say, a plow or some other machine in order to work. It's heavy, it's burdensome. So that meaning behind this, in the context of the story, which is about marriage, because it's a comedy, is that you're going to miss ideas like this in that Don Pedro, currently unmarried, currently not in love, is discussing marriage as a burden. And this is something that you don't really get from the modern translation. This is a theme that carries through. They refer to marriage as a yoke multiple times throughout the course of Much Ado About Nothing. And these various themes are something that you will miss if you're just reading the No Fear. So while it helps to be able to understand a lot of the crazy allusions to Greek mythology about Cupid and Vulcan that go throughout this play, at the same time you're going to miss thematic elements like this, and you need to be aware of these things. So I would definitely recommend this as a supplementary material, not a replacement for reading the play. Again, I have made mistakes. King Lear is much more difficult if you didn't actually read the play. I promise. A lot. It's a lot more difficult. Another thing that Shakespeare does, and I will show you how to get there briefly, is they do analyses and summaries, and they give supplementary materials for various works of literature. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm just going to look up my favorite book. This is the home page. This is where you go to if you Google it. If you Google Sparknotes. And we're going to go down, and here we have a study guide for Beloved by Toni Morrison, which if you haven't read it yet, it's amazing. It's one of my favorites. My favorite book quote of all time comes from Beloved. And so what they'll give you is they'll give you a summary and an analysis, and they'll give a plot overview, so we'll take a look at that and see what that gives us. I'm going to be honest, I never used the Sparknotes summaries for this one. I did use other things for Beloved on Sparknotes, and I'm going to show you that. But here's the basic plot: is Beloved begins in 1873 in Cincinnati, Ohio, where Setha, a former slave, has been living with her 18-year-old daughter, Denver. Setha's mother-in-law, Baby Suggs, lived with them until her death 8 years earlier. Just before Baby Suggs' death, Setha's two sons, Howard and Bugler, ran away. Setha believes they fled because of the malevolent presence of an abusive ghost that has haunted their house at 124 Bluestone Road for years. Denver, however, likes the ghost, which everyone believes to be the spirit of her dead sister. So this plot overview is actually fairly decent for the book. There's a ton more to it than that. Mainly the fact that the ghost is in fact the dead baby sister, and baby sister comes back and does all that scary ghosty stuff that's horrifying. And then there's some more here that it goes through, but let's be honest, you're never going to bother to read all of that because you have a assignment due in 3 hours, right? No, never. What? No. So, there's a plot overview, and then it will go through and do a summary and analysis of all the chapters, which is fantastically awesome. Because, let's be honest, every now and then we do fall behind, and we do want to at least be able to participate somewhat in class. But if you want to get that 9 on your AP Literature practice essay, then you're going to have to actually read the book again. So here's an important quote. 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom, and then you could see important quotations explained. This one actually leaves out a lot of the really important quotes in Beloved, mainly because there are so many of them, but they only choose to list 5, which is really confusing. But a lot of what you're going to find with this is that, and this here's the major problem with books like Beloved, which are so heavy, they're so dense. Beloved is only partially, like, barely cemented in any form of reality. It goes back and forth. It goes through vague memories of the slaves at large traveling on a ship across the ocean from Africa to America in these chapters called the unspoken thoughts. That's generally what they're referred to. And you're going to miss so much information if you just go through the analysis and the summary. One of the great things that it does, though, is it will give you a quick quiz. It's like, how much do you remember from your reading? So, let's see. What did Baby Suggs want to add to her room during her first few days? Color. What prompted Setha's two sons to run away from home? Their dead sister's ghost. Man, this book is so awesome, you guys. What did Setha use to pay for her dead daughter's gravestone? 10 minutes of sex. 9 months of labor would have been cool, but that's not what happened, I'm pretty sure. Again, it's been like over a year now. How many children did Setha and Hallie have together? 4. What did Setha's whip scars resemble? A choke cherry tree. 5 out of 5 questions were correct. Booyah! Still got it. Alright. So that is one of the things that this does, is it will at least go through and it will give you the major ideas behind the novel, and it'll make sure that you've at least got those. It's a really useful for a quick rescue if you fall a little bit behind and you're having trouble catching up. So it'll also go through themes, slavery's destruction of identity. That was a very important topic in the novel. This is a really good analysis too, where it discusses here about the tobacco tin heart, and he concluded that one should love nothing too intensely. So the idea was that he had this empty, rusted out tobacco tin, and this was his heart. It was just left empty. Occasionally he put like some junk in it, but there was nothing to it that was important. And Setha is accused of loving too much, of loving too strong. And she says, if I love it all, I'm going to love with all of my heart. I'm not going to be this sort of person who only gives a half love. A half love is no love at all. the importance of community solidarity. A lot of the themes in Beloved talk about how slavery destroyed family values. It's an exploration of pretty much just how slavery was a genocide of culture. And it does that fairly well. So let's go to symbols and see what they've got for that, because this is actually pretty good. The color red, you know, it's the color of blood and all of that. And trees, the tobacco tin box, there's more on that. It's really cool. But again, there's not very much. There's not even close to enough to be able to go through this novel and get everything that you need just by reading this. There was so much in it. The roses from when they go to a carnival together. That's there, but the really important archetypes behind it are not. It just says that they stink of death and how it's false, that the life of Setha, Denver, and Paul D together is false. It's already decayed away. But they don't go into it enough that you'd be able to get by on it. So what you're looking at, essentially with Sparknotes, is a way to help you if you fall behind and you have to get to that class and you have to at least open your mouth and say something in order to get your participation points for the day. You're a senior in high school, you're exhausted, you're literally dying, you're running on nothing but coffee, and you just need to get through the day until you can catch back up. And for that, I would argue that Sparknotes is pretty fantastic. It's really going to help you go through, you haven't read the book in forever, and now your teacher's assigned an essay on it. You don't have time to read it again, might as well get a review in. Might as well get that second little summary to make sure that you picked up on all the important parts, if you did the reading, all of that stuff. For that, I would argue that Sparknotes is pretty fantastic. It's pretty great. It has a lot of weaknesses. It's not a replacement for reading the book, but it is going to help you. It is a helping hand. It's there so that you can, if you can't catch up right away. It's there if you're having a little bit of trouble understanding. It's there if you want a little bit more about characters. Let's look at Setha here. The main character. Setha, who murdered her 2-year-old baby in a woodshed. She's the protagonist of the novel. She's not the antagonist. She's the protagonist. And she talks about and it'll go through and it'll talk about the struggles that she's been through in these 2 little paragraphs here. It's not nearly enough to really understand her character, but it's enough to get you by, at least for a little while. One last thing I do want to point out about this website is I call this the distraction lineup. It's great. I go to Sparknotes all the time just so I can look for stuff like this. Like if the Greek gods had Tinder, or if Facebook were used during the time of Romeo and Juliet. It's pretty awesome. Just want to throw this out here. It's great. I love it so much. Artemis, 7 miles a day. That's awesome. Oh my god, that's so great. You don't even know. Okay. Or maybe you do. I hope you do, because Artemis is fantastic. She's one of my favorites. Anyway, how indecisive are you on a scale of 1 to Hamlet? I need to go back through this. I call this the distractions. It's awesome. You need that break from BSing your Picture of Dorian Gray project? Guilty. This is an awesome one. So, anyway, that's all I have time for. They're literally about to kick me off of this site. So, thanks for paying attention. I hope you got something useful out of this. And, yeah, use Sparknotes as a supplementary material. As a supplementary material. As a supplementary material. Got that? As a supplementary material. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a bad place. Like I was with that Dorian Gray project. Oh man, that was rough. I didn't even know what the book they were talking about was when another person did the project. Yikes.